So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Upendra from AEEE, and we're about to commence the second episode of AEEE's Luminary Lecture Series. I'll just tell you how the session will go. After the welcome and initial introduction by Dr. Satish, we'll have Steve deliver the much awaited lecture and enlighten us. After that, Dr. Satish will also share his reflections briefly and have an interaction with Steve. Post which we will have questions and answers for about 15 minutes with the audience. Few quick notes. The session is being recorded and the recording will be available on AEEE's YouTube channel as well. And we have kept the audience members muted, but you all can post questions anytime in the Q&A box. And you can post your name and organization as well when you post a question. And you can also raise your hand icon when the Q&A session happens at the very end. So these are some of the housekeeping items for today's session. Let's set the context. AEEE launched this quarterly series last November, actually, with a powerful talk by Professor Ashok Gadgil on heat stress in India. So our aim is to bring globally respected luminaries to ignite dialogue on India's journey to a climate resilient, energy secure future. And today we have Steve with us. I will request Dr. Satish to share a few words about Steve and introduce.
Thank you, Upendra. And it is my privilege to introduce today's luminary, Mr. Steve Nadel, Executive Director of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, a position he has held since 1999. And around the time when I first came to know Steve, on my first visit to ACEEE summer study when I was working as a scientist at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And it has been a very productive and rich association, not just for me personally, but for between AEEE and ACEEE as well, as we have collaborated, as we have picked up our ideas, as we have received guidance, support, and mentorship from Steve and many others at ACEEE. Across 4 decades of Steve's research and advocacy, he has helped the United States avoid hundreds of power plants, saved consumers billions of dollars, and set benchmarks that are copied worldwide. He sits on multiple advisory boards, holds degrees from MIT and Tufts, and has authored more than 250 publications. And as I mentioned, AEEE has also benefited from Steve's and ACEEE's generosity. I would also like to mention that Steve has been to India many times. Perhaps he's going to share some of the anecdotes. But Steve first came to India in 1990. I hope I have the date right. And I know that Mr. Padu Padmanabhan is in the audience. And we were just talking about, I think, Steve's initial forays into India, where Padu has commissioned a study that Steve was leading. I believe it was on demand side management, a topic that still gets a lot of attention 35 years later. And so we are all very excited to hear from Steve. And the title of his talk is Beyond Energy Savings, Rethinking Energy Efficiency for the Future. So without further ado, over to you, Steve.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. And yes, I very much enjoyed my many trips to India, starting with that very first project, and when Padu took me under his wing and helped show me around, and I had a lot to learn. I still have a lot to learn, but I have learned a few things about India in the intervening years. And I look forward to the discussion and your input on some of the things I have to say and how this may or may not apply to India. So with that, beyond energy savings, rethinking energy efficiency for the future. Let's see. And does it? There we go. First, very briefly, wanted to introduce my organization, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, which is kind of the AEEE of the United States. We were formed in 1980, and we are working to scale up energy efficiency to rapidly and equitably reduce energy use costs and emissions in a way that benefits all. We have become a trusted source of research and program and policy advice, and we have about 75 staff now. And fortunately, we have had quite a bit of impact. The picture here was a signing ceremony for an American energy law with President Obama. I'm on the very end because I'm the least important. The people, the senators and so on, they got to be in the middle. I was just on the edge. In the US, we've made a lot of progress on energy efficiency. The top line shows how our gross domestic product has grown steadily over since 1970. The bottom line shows how energy consumption has barely changed. The difference is both energy efficiency, energy productivity, as well as some changes in the economy. And based on some limited data, we approximated the energy productivity improvement you can see in that middle line. Now, for India, the picture is not quite as clear. This is just GDP per unit of energy consumption. It has generally been increasing, but not quite as rapidly. And I don't have the data to separate out if there's any structural changes versus just the efficiency. But there's no question that on average, India has been improving with the exception of COVID in 2020, where everybody took a dip. In the US, some of the things that have driven this, and also I think they apply to India, improvements in appliance efficiency. In this graph, various products you can see where one on the left is 1980, and you can see in some cases we've reduced the energy use 70% for these products. Others not quite as much, but all have gone down significantly. Likewise, lighting. We used to have a lot of incandescent lights, a lot of fluorescent. Now it's becoming overwhelmingly LED, similar to India. And we have building codes that regulate the efficiency of new construction. The upper line is for residential codes. The lower line is for commercial codes. And as you could see, the typical new building uses about half the energy per square meter as a building built in 1975. We've also done a lot of policies to help spur these efficiency changes. These are estimates of how much we've saved from the different policies. The units are quadrillion BTUs, which are approximately exajoules. They're within 5%. But vehicle fuel economy standards has been the most important, followed by appliance and equipment efficiency standards. Utility run energy efficiency programs. Energy Star has been quite important. Building codes. Also federally funded research and development. And that's a very conservative estimate, but it helps feed the pipeline in terms of new efficiency savings. Now at ACEEE, we work in four main areas: industry, buildings, transportation, and the power sector. And in all of these areas, we see major opportunities to continue to improve energy efficiency despite all that we've done. This is from a study we did looking at what is the opportunity between 2020 and 2050 to further use energy efficiency to reduce energy use and carbon dioxide emissions. This particular graph shows the emissions, but the energy use graph is very similar. But as you could see, there's lots of additional opportunity for appliances, zero energy buildings, retrofits to existing buildings, industrial efficiency, vehicle efficiency, and other transportation ones, as well as distribution systems. So we find that we can reduce energy use about in half by 2050 with these additional opportunities. And if we want to fully decarbonize, we'll need to change energy sources for how we get the other half of our current energy use. So what are some of the major opportunities for the future? We see industrial process optimization as one of the key opportunities. There's a lot of waste in factories, or whether it's material waste, heat waste, etc. And we think by carefully optimizing the system, good engineering, we can dramatically reduce that. We see artificial intelligence, AI, really helping with that process. There's also new industrial processes, better ways to produce steel, aluminum, glass, etc. I'll talk about a few of those a little later. Electric vehicles and electric trucks are another big one. They have much lower energy losses than diesel or other internal combustion engines. So we see them as an efficiency opportunity. Just as with industrial, you have commercial, multifamily, as well as single-family home optimization, particularly with heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC. One opportunity, for example, is for the larger buildings to continuously monitor and commission them, to keep a careful eye on what the energy use is, what the temperatures, airflows, etc., and find problems as they first crop up and solve them, rather than waiting a year or two until someone does an energy audit. And again, we see AI really helping there. We see heat pumps being a high efficiency way to provide heat, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. For industrials, particularly the low to medium temperature heat, not so much the high temperature heat, but heat pumps tend to be much more efficient than combustion, which is basically limited to an efficiency in the upper 90%, whereas heat pumps can go well over 100% and often over 200 or 300%. Net zero energy and emissions new construction, another important technique, particularly for countries like India, where there's a lot of construction. It's much easier to build it right the first time than build it wrong and then have to retrofit. Data centers are becoming they've always been a significant load, but they're growing rapidly now. How do we better optimize those as well as manage their loads? And I'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. Things like in the distribution system, amorphous core transformers, which, as I understand, India is actually doing quite a bit more than we are. There's more room to adopt them in India, but we have a lot to learn from what you're doing. And then I just note what we call weatherization, insulation, sealing. How do we keep the heat out in the hot weather and the heat in the cold weather? Probably more important for the US than for India, but on a hot day, you want to keep that cool air in. So why efficiency? From the title of the talk, obviously, it's beyond energy savings. Yes, we save energy. Yes, we save money. In the US, all those efficiency savings are saving more than $4,000 per capita each year. Likewise, we want to reduce greenhouse gas and other emissions, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. We want to reduce power demand. We want to create jobs. We want to be competitive in the industries of the future. That's become particularly important in the US, but in many other countries. How do we be competitive in various industries? And I know that's important in India as well. And then resilience and comfort. So let me talk about a few of those. I'm not going to go into the obvious ones of saving money, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but let me talk about some of the other ones. This is a chart looking at annual premature deaths attributable to on-road diesel NOx emissions. As you can see here, China tops the world. This is 2015 data. I haven't been able to get more recent data. I believe it's improved in all countries since then, but this illustrates the depth of the problem, where China, the EU, and India have large numbers of deaths and large opportunities to reduce their NOx emissions, which is not to say other countries don't have problems as well. But yes, we talk a lot about greenhouse gases, but there's other pollutants that are even more harmful to health, such as NOx, such as fine particulates, PM 2.5, something else that diesel engines produce a fair amount of. So how do we reduce these pollutants and improve health and avert death? Power demand. In the US recently, power demand has started increasing rapidly again, as you can see on the right. The upper one is total energy, electricity over the course of a year in terawatt hours. On the bottom is peak demand in gigawatts, and you can see they're increasing quite a bit just in the last few years and projected through to 2050. This is a forecast that just came out last week. What are some of the sources of growth? Data centers are definitely some of that. That's the source, particularly of some of the growth the last couple of years. Industrial loads. In the US, we have quite a bit of investment in new industrial plants, new battery plants, new car manufacturing, etc. That's significant loads. Electric vehicles and electric trucks are ramping up. Energy use that used to use transportation used to be relatively limited electricity. It's becoming much more common. And what I call electrification, whether it's a process heats or building heating, those loads are all increasing. And so with efficiency, we're going to have to tackle each of those sources of growth, as well as some of the underlying historic energy use. Jobs. Jobs are very important to help keep people employed, earning a living, feeling fulfilled. People say, well, if you use less energy, do you have less jobs in coal, oil, and gas? Well, at least in the United States, we have more jobs in energy efficiency than in those other ones. This is a study that came out earlier this year. We have about 2.3 million people employed in the efficiency field. It's about 40% of the total energy jobs. As you can see on the left, other ones are traditional transmission, distribution, and storage, fossil fuels, other clean sources. Those are all significant, but efficiency is the largest. And in terms of where the jobs are, nearly half are administration, sales, and management. Construction is by far the largest industry for those jobs, and HVAC is a particularly important source of those. So it'd be interesting to look in India about what your jobs are. Perhaps that's a study for AEEE to try to do in the future to get a better handle on those jobs, because I know how important jobs can be, you know, whether it's coal miner jobs, etc. So I mentioned being competitive for the industries of the future. Here's a few examples. AI is one that a lot of countries are trying to make great strides in, but we need to use the power very efficiently, which means both good, you know, HVAC systems, efficient water systems, but what the software is to help run things. Do you really need to use the most powerful models all the time? When can you use shortcuts, if you will, rather than the most powerful models? That's one of the ways that DeepSeek has basically maximized their computing power and reduce their energy use by figuring out ways to not use the most powerful chips in large quantities all the time. Steel is another important use. I think the world's starting to move toward direct reduction, ultimately using hydrogen. I know we're starting to do that in the US, but I believe India, you're ahead of us. So congratulations and keep making that progress. Aluminum, things like inert anode technologies, new technologies where the anode doesn't get eaten up and that electricity use is significantly reduced. There's a a plant now being built in Quebec that we're all looking to see how it does. Chemicals, how do we move towards bio and hydrogen feedstocks and significantly reduce the fossil fuels, oil and gas feedstocks. We want to eliminate them, but can we produce a lot of chemicals with alternative feedstocks? Because the feedstock use is one of the big sources of fuel use in chemicals. Air conditioning and heat pumps. In India, you know well about rapid growth in air conditioning, and it's going to keep continuing. As I mentioned before, we should be considering heat pumps not just for buildings, but also in industry. The picture on the right bottom, I don't know if people can see it, is an industrial heat pump, for example. And with heat pumps, one of the challenges has been, at least in the US, and I don't know what it is in India, is that part of our electric rates are in variable costs, part are in fixed costs, but the fixed costs don't fully cover the fixed costs. So that the high energy users, such as heat pump users, effectively subsidize other customer classes. So we're starting to have separate electric rates for heat pump customers in some states to basically no longer subsidize other customers. Still pay their fair share of power, but if we have any electric rate experts, I'd be curious if this has some possibilities in India. That's one area I haven't gotten into the details in India. And then another key industry is electric vehicles. And people always think about cars, but the trucks, I think, are going to be at least as important. Well, there are fewer of them. They drive a long distance and they have high emissions, as I pointed out. So I also mentioned resilience and comfort. With the world getting warmer, with more frequent storms, how do we build buildings so that it can better withstand those effects, including rising temperatures? Now, an efficient building or efficient refrigerator can better maintain temperatures for many hours without power. So that's a form of resilience. And as Dr. Gill probably told you last time, heat-related deaths are unfortunately growing, and we need to do something about it. This particular graph shows heat-related deaths in Phoenix, Arizona. And you can see it's been steadily growing, and unfortunately in 2024, it got a lot worse. These tend to be elderly. Often they might have air conditioning, but the air conditioner breaks and they can't afford to repair them. But they could be people who are outside when they shouldn't be, etc. How do we minimize these deaths? And making homes efficient can really help that. I know, for example, there was a major heat wave in Paris a number of years ago. Most of the deaths happened on the top floor of buildings. They weren't adequately insulated, and the top floor has got too warm. How can we use efficiency as one of the ways that we reduce these deaths, not to mention the effect on comfort? Now, one of the things that ACEEE does is an International Energy Efficiency Scorecard. We look at the 25 highest energy consuming countries. This is the results of the 2022 scorecard. We'll be publishing a 2025 scorecard this fall. But this is the results of the previous one. As you could see, Europe tended to do very well. The top 5 countries were all in Europe. I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. India was 15th, one of the better countries in Southeast Asia, but not quite as good as some of the countries in North Asia. United States was 10th, kind of middle of the pack. The new scorecard, I would say there's not dramatic changes so far. It's still in draft, so I won't give anything more than that because I'm sure some of the information will change as it goes through a review. Europe, they do extensive government spending on energy efficiency in various ways, whether it's loan programs, grant programs, fuel poverty programs, etc. They have very extensive industrial programs, technical assistance, requirements for energy managers, for energy audits, etc. They do have a price on carbon for large emitters, as well as in some countries for medium-sized emitters, so a lot on industry. They invest heavily in trains and public transit, and India does a pretty good job as well, but there may be some things to learn from Europe there, not from the United States, where we don't invest as much. And then they also will use mandates, whether appliance standards. They have many appliance and equipment standards, vehicle standards, which are quite strong, continue to ramp up. And they're in the process of implementing building performance standards, which require people to get their existing medium and large buildings up to a certain level of performance. In the US, we do okay. We have a lot of the appliance standards. The utilities invest quite a bit. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be slipping for the next few years. The Trump administration, they have a priority of, quote, energy dominance. They don't care that much about efficiency. So many federal efficiency programs will be cut, but it looks like some will continue, such as some of the research and development industrial programs. We have a home energy rebate program to retrofit homes. It looks like that will continue. We have a bunch of tax incentives. That's unclear what's going to happen to those. We'll find out in the next few months. But we see for the next 3 years at least, energy efficiency, innovation, and leadership will be at the state and local levels in the US, as well as the international levels. And we look forward to seeing what other countries do so we can get back onto that track when we get to a next administration after our 2028 election. In terms of India, you can see in the right side, your transportation efforts are slightly above normal. Your industry level is about equal to the median, where there are opportunities to improve your buildings and national level efforts. But still, as you can see on the bottom, India did have a higher score than Indonesia, Australia, and Thailand. So you're doing a lot well, but there's obviously more you can do. Some of the things we identified in that report, and I know we have a lot of experts on this call. I welcome your feedback on those lists. What are we missing? And well, where did we not quite get it right? But things like the national level, it really helps to set actual energy efficiency targets and then monitor progress towards those. As I noted, Europe is spending a lot at the national level on efficiency. There may be more opportunities in India. I know you're not a rich country, but you're doing better. Maybe the government can increase its spending. Building codes. You have some building codes, but how do we improve them? And how do we improve their implementation? Because the implementation is, shall we say, uneven. You have minimum efficiency standards on a number of products, but in places like the US, China, and Europe, we have about 50 products regulated. Last I looked, you were around 10 or so, but please correct me if I have that a little wrong. You have your PAC program, which is great. It's a real example, although for many cases, you haven't really ramped up the targets for some of the originally affected industries. There may be more opportunities to tighten the targets and not just expand to other sectors in additional PAC cycles. And also, are there opportunities to invest more in R&D? As one of the world's major economies, there's a lot that you can do through your universities and otherwise to help lead the world in terms of new efficiency technologies that will be born in India, and you could become the leader in those. And then things like tighten truck emission standards, modernize rail. I know there's some investments, but probably more can be done. And with that, there's my contact information. I'll leave this up for a second, and I'll let Satish start with a few questions, and then look forward to the rest of your questions.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Great, Steve, for that wonderful overview of first, like how US is doing, where you see the energy efficiency sort of like movement, or I think this entire community headed where we need to focus in the coming decades. Also, I think some of the things that you mentioned about um, the impact that AI can have, and I think we are seeing the impact of AI everywhere. You specifically marked out the industrial processes and some of the controls, I think, that will start to incorporate AI. Um, I wanted to, I'm going to maybe just have a couple of clarification questions, and before I get into one or two larger issues and how India is going to get impacted in your opinion, because we, of course, this is an India audience, some of the people would be interested in knowing. So, Steve, there were some really interesting statistics. You cited the source of those research as well. So one number was that in the US, there is a $4,000 per capita sort of savings that energy efficiency has delivered. And I think that sounds great. And I'm just wondering, is there kind of like a breakdown of that? Does this reflect the same things that you have described earlier in terms of vehicle standards, appliance standards, utility programs? Or I think in terms of the savings, is it a little different? And maybe I have one more question related to numbers, which is that you said that US is undergoing transformation. It is kind of like its total power generation capacity was kind of, I think, around 800 gigawatt for a long time. And it is forecast to grow to like 1200 gigawatt by 2050. So this is about 50% increase in the generation capacity. But I think in the energy consumption capacity, I was a little intrigued that the number is increasing from 4,000 terawatt hour to 8,000 terawatt hour. My understanding was that if renewable energy is penetrating, then I think it should be the other way around. So I just wanted you to maybe, I think, shed some more light or add more color to these numbers that you showed in your slides.
Okay, the $4,000 per capita is an ACEEE estimate. It was based on the average price of energy relative to that earlier graph that shows what are the energy productivity improvements. We did not do a breakdown. It's broad. It's a very high level. That said, it is obviously in transportation and home energy use, but it also includes the fact that businesses save and that all other things being equal flows through in terms of slightly lower prices for goods and services. So it's a very broad measure. And we haven't done a breakdown, but it is all of those. In terms of the power demand, I just showed you one example forecast. It was not by us. I haven't gotten into all the details of it. Frankly, I think some of these forecasts are a little too high, that they don't really include energy efficiency. And given all of this power demand and the cost, because new power plants are relatively tend to cost more than existing power plants, that there will be a lot more efficiency that will slow, not eliminate that growth. So I don't know the exact things for example, renewable energy. Yes, there will be some renewable energy actually on buildings that the utilities don't service, but a lot of the renewable energy, it tends to be cheaper to have central systems. So that includes a lot of renewable energy, but in central and community systems. And in terms of the increase in terawatt hours versus gigawatts, that's someone else's forecast. I haven't dug into the details. I just use that to illustrate that forecasts are out.
Okay, just one other question, because you also showed about jobs and, of course, the energy offset that efficiency offers and investment. We have spoken about this, Steve, because AEEE is very interested. You also mentioned that this could be a very, very interesting analysis, and AEEE is sort of spending time and effort on this. How um, widely, I think these jobs creation report or the sort of like power demand offset numbers are widely used. I'm thinking that as head of ACEEE, what what are sort of like top 2 or 3 things that you hear from the policymakers or the government or the funders or citizens groups, which is of the greatest interest in terms of the entire spectrum of things that ACEEE does?
Right. The greatest interest varies with time and location to some extent. When energy prices are high, people want to reduce energy costs. When unemployment is high, people want jobs. I would say lately in the US, competitiveness is very high up there. Jobs are very high up. In some states, emissions are high up, but it's not that important at the federal level these days. We discuss all of these benefits, and depending where we are and what the situation there, we will emphasize different things. We'll talk to the various local people, say, what is most important in your area? And that's what we emphasize. But we like having all of these explanations handy because they are all benefits of efficiency, and you just have to sometimes emphasize different things in different places. When I'm in the southern US, I do not talk about climate change. You talk about jobs and competitiveness. You talk about energy bills. You talk about resiliency because they're getting an awful lot of hurricanes, tornadoes, etc. You adapt to your local area.
Great. These are really, really wise words. One other specific question you mentioned, you spent some time saying what's going to be the impact of data centers, because we all see that the amount of compute, the amount of storage, photographs, everything that we are using AI infiltration into everything will lead to the creation of more data centers. And we have seen both, and I have heard like both sides. IEA came out with a report specifically on this. So in your sort of like estimation, do you see data centers becoming 20% of like US electricity consumption, like say in another 15, 20 years? Or do you see that at maybe like 8 to 10%? I think what's your estimate? How big is this data center sort of power hungry appetite is going to take us in terms of, and we see that a lot of nuclear power plants are being designed to serve these data centers. So that's a pretty interesting and a more recent phenomena. Perhaps I think it's not to the same degree in India, but maybe I think India will lag a few years or one decade, and then it will come to India as well. So it's interesting because I know there were some questions, I think, in the chat box as well, where people were asking this question. So maybe I think it will help people understand what's happening in the US.
Right. As I recall, the US now are roughly 5%. I'd expect that to roughly double to 10%. Yes, I've seen some things saying it's 20. A, a lot of the proposals to build data centers is just overbuilding. They'll compete with each other and only some of them will get built. Also, this power, just getting the power is challenging. It can be expensive, but a data center can use enough power for as a nuclear power plant puts out 1,000 megawatts. And getting that much power is challenging. So I think the data centers will start sharpening their pencils more to figure out how they can make do with a bit less power. So my estimate would be, yes, we'll double the 10%, but I doubt we'll get to 20. And I do think it is coming to India at some point. You do a lot of work in technology, the ITTs and all of that. It's not a question of if, it's when.
Right. Right. No, thank you. And I have one question, I think a little bit of a macro level question, and also trying to get a peek into your head. You did talk about India, and you had a few recommendations in terms of setting higher energy efficiency targets, increasing national spending. AEEE and many of the people here in efficiency community, we also talk about some of those things. So there is convergence on that. I think investing more in R&D, tightening PAT program. So all of that look good. My understanding is that the number of efficiency, I think the products that are covered by the standards and labeling program has increased significantly. I know that there are people who are knowledgeable on that. It's probably like maybe 20 mandatory and then probably another 10, 12, which is in the voluntary phase. So this is definitely India is doing. And as you mentioned, vehicles and appliances are also, standards are also a big contributor to, I think, where India is saving energy through the energy efficiency program. So the question, Steve, and considering that you have been coming to India and spending time here, you have worked with AEEE on some of our projects where we have tried to emulate some of the excellent work that ACEEE has done. So India is clearly still on a growth curve. You mentioned that we are still continuing to build a lot of the infrastructure, and with increasing demand and evolving infrastructure. And in this context, I think maybe an outside-in view, how do you see that we leapfrog traditional efficiency pathways that had served us well, say like over last 20, 30 years, and to design future ready strategies from the very beginning, whether that's sort of like coming from policy, maybe a lot of the policy work, but also I think in terms of how do we design, control, and sort of optimize our infrastructure. So any words of wisdom, any advice on that?
I'm sure you know the numbers much better than I do, so I won't give numbers, but new construction is enormous. How do you move to net zero construction? You're doing the solar decathlon. There's lots of there's, as I understand it, hundreds of examples of net zero buildings in India. How do we make that the norm? Eventually, maybe it's building codes or something, although I know getting building codes enforced is a challenge in India. But how do we make new construction really net zero? Likewise, as I recall, about over half of your energy use is in industry. There's a lot of new factories going in, whether it's Apple, whether it's homegrown, et cetera. How do you do the very latest technologies, the very latest things? Like, I mean, you are building, for example, DRI steel plants, but apply that everywhere to say, we want the world's best technology. We're not just going to be building, buy up some inefficient factory and ship it over here. But I would expect in 2050, the majority of energy use in India, this is a guess, and you can tell me whether it's wrong, is going to be things that have not been built yet. So how do you build them right the first time? And I say not built, whether it's factories or buildings.
Well, thank you, Steve. I think you are right on the money. India is doing a few things very well. I think in terms of, you mentioned steel, cement, so some of the best plants are here. But also, I think there are a lot of legacy buildings which need to be retrofitted, legacy plants which need to be upgraded. And of course, all the new stuff that is going to come in over the next like 2-3 decades. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to transfer it back to, I don't know whether it's Upendra, who will probably direct some of the questions that may be coming through the Q&A box that we have. So over to you, Upendra.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, for the great lecture, and Satish sir for reflections and discussion. We've received quite a few questions. I think some of those questions have been covered in the discussion we just had. But I'll request all the other participants in the meantime that I read out a few questions. You can raise hands and we can perhaps have an interaction. Steve, one of the questions that we have received anonymously is, for you to perhaps address the large community of energy efficiency professionals that, how do we go from here taking the work to delivering much deeper energy savings? It's perhaps the ask is to address the entire community of energy efficiency professionals as to how we can achieve the deeper energy efficiency savings.
Right. I mean, India has many very accomplished energy efficiency professionals. I applaud you for what you're doing. But yes, how do you get the latest training on the latest techniques in India and internationally is useful? How do you grow your numbers? How do we, get more students interested in this work? So there's many more people doing it. How do we convince, whether it's government or private companies to the importance of this work, using some of the techniques, some of the arguments I mentioned to hire these professionals. But ultimately, it comes down to, I mean, probably the key word I mentioned was optimization. Optimization means good professional judgment. And yes, the AI can help, but you ultimately need a person to ask the right questions, to interpret it, to understand when uh, its answer doesn't make sense. And so, how do we really grow those efficiency professional in terms of numbers as well as in terms of their skills?
Yeah, thank you. And there's another question, I think, which is more a bigger picture and at the decarbonization and emerging economies level, that how, balancing ambitious decarbonization targets with the economic realities of developing nations. How do we enforce energy efficiency standards across member countries without stifling industrial growth or exacerbating energy poverty?
Right. You may have noticed I said relatively little about decarbonization. I understand where the priorities are of the government of India, but they care about jobs, they care about industrial competitiveness. So, how do we emphasize those? But the new techniques tend to be much more efficient and lower emissions. So, that will really help reduce emissions, even if that's not the primary purpose. And I also said, start looking at health, whether it's from diesel emissions, from heat waves, etc. That is also a powerful motivation to help drive this change, to continue to spew out, dirty factories that spew out things that kill people. That's not, in my view, in the interest of the government of India. That you really need to clean up these factories and these vehicles enough that you're not killing people. So I would emphasize those things. And yes, I recognize that global climate change is a lower motivation for the government.
Thank you. Think we've not had anyone raise hands, so I'll perhaps ask more questions from the Q&A box. There's a question about how companies are asking what they could do with the old inefficient assets that are working well. So how can circularity can come into the business model of OEMs?
Right. So yes, you can often recycle things. Refurbish them sometimes. But to oversimplify, the average piece of industrial equipment lasts maybe 15 years. I understand there are boilers that can last more than 40 years. Um, but a lot of this equipment will eventually need to be renewed. So renew it when it's getting ready for failure. We're big fans of planned replacement as opposed to letting it fail and suddenly your factory is shut down for a few days while you frantically try to get a new piece of equipment in there. But when something's getting old, put it in your capital plan, replace it. But yes, when you do, try to recycle, refurbish, etc.
Yeah, I think Padu is raising hands. Team, can we unmute and show the video of Padu?
Hi, hi, Steve. Can you hear me?
I guess I'll say good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. And yeah, so it's great to hear you virtually, Steve. It's relatively simple to think energy efficiency. We have been doing that for quite some years, you, me, and all of us. And here is a question that you are eminently qualified to answer. It's far more difficult to rethink energy efficiency. So my question is, how can India rethink energy efficiency from being a marginal contributor to being considered as a key resource, no different than oil, coal, gas, and renewables. What is it that we need to do from an institutional and policy perspective so that we can raise the level, not just of awareness, but the level of implementation to the same extent that we have done on the supply side of the energy equation?
Excellent question, and you know India better than I do, but I'll throw out a few things. How do we get the decision makers to focus on all of the benefits instead of just saying, well, I only care, gee, energy use is this, just we can save a few, billion rupees, so what? But it's energy efficiency is additive. It does reduce deaths from pollution, from heat waves. It does reduce emissions. It does create jobs. It does help us our economy to grow. Saying all of those things together contribute, and it should be something much more important. And I think ultimately it comes down to finding a few key people, a chief minister or something who can be convinced to get it, and then it spreads from there. But how do you find those key champions that other people will listen to who say, yes, it has so many benefits, and together this is a top priority?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll ask one more question from the box. This is, I think, about waste. With growing mountains of waste, can we use energy efficiency to make the case for producing raw materials? Example, aluminium, steel from the recycled source. Any information or work that you recall from ACEEE research?
Certainly, I mean, in the US at least, a lot of aluminum is recycled. We tend to use it in cans in particular. There are a number of states that actually put a deposit on the can so people will do it, but we've gotten a lot of recycling there. I've seen a fair amount of recycling in some of the major Indian cities, but I suspect it's once you get beyond certain neighborhoods and certain cities, it's much less prominent. I haven't looked into, you kind of imply, the garbage dumps. Can you potentially mine those? I don't know. That's expensive. And, the percentage of aluminum in a garbage dump, I'm guessing is pretty small, but strikes me as a good project for a student to, a master's thesis or something, look at that to say, is there any possibilities there? I'd only be guessing.
Thank you. I think we're nearly at the top of the hour. I'll take one more question, or maybe a comment. I think Mr. Kishore Kumar has shared an update on India's MEPS, that there are about 40 appliances efficiency policy, of which 16 are mandatory, and India planning to have 50 products MEPS in the next 3 years. Any reflection, Chief?
I think that's great. It is one of many ways to improve efficiency. I had mentioned some countries that are in 40 or 50. You're about to join that list. Great. I was using old data and I apologize.
Right.
Upendra.
Yeah.
So this is Satish. I think you need to ask Jayanta's question. That's like not related to this, but I think it will be fun.
Right. I think Jayanta is perhaps on travel right now. He says, "Hi, Steve. Your OOO had an interesting note. I'm on my annual walkabout backpacking the Continental Divide Trail through New Mexico and Colorado and hanging out with the coyotes, elk, and desert hares. Any life lessons from these trips that you want to share?"
So I do month-long hiking trips in remote parts of the US, and I find it's a really good way for me to renew myself, to relax and just let my mind wander. And yes, I do think about work a little bit too, and I'll jot down lots of notes of things I want to look at. But in the day to day, you're so busy, there's no time to think. So I find these month-long trips is great times to think. And so I know it can be tough to take that much time off. I wasn't doing this when my daughter was growing up, for example, but it's useful for me.
Thank you. I think this was a great question to sort of wrap up the session with. This was very comprehensive. So thank you, Steve. Energy efficiency is certainly beyond savings. It spans across, as you rightly illustrated, productivity, jobs, competitiveness, resilience, and emissions. So not just savings, as the title said. This, as expected, this was like a masterclass on energy efficiency. So at AEEE, we all share our gratitude to you. I also thank our communications and IT teams for all the support, and very importantly to each of the more than 80 participants for joining us and for engaging and asking very interesting questions. We will meet again on another lecture with another luminary. The next luminary lecture will be announced in July, so please stay tuned, everyone, and follow AEEE on LinkedIn and X for more updates. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.